be a good idea. I called it first, wait till. You can't both film me at the same time. He got over £3,000 for his birthday from the stream and doesn't appreciate a thing. Wow. I never knew that. He doesn't pretend to cry and get all emotional when he gets donations. That's funny. Smacks it one for that. Yeah, you would do, don't you? If someone says, "Do you want to play video games for a living and we'll pay you?" You're not going to say, "Fucking no, are you?" It's not a personal sacrifice. Yeah, everybody says that. To be honest, the only way, if I had the community behind me and I could get the ad revenue and the sales, I'd do it. Otherwise, I'd be taking the favour. We've all got families to support, Jack, but I don't rely on people giving me money on the internet to do it. Well, that's it. You meet some good friends on Twitch, that's what it's all about, and gaming. To be honest, streamers do take a lot of shit. I mean, it does get quite stressful trying to put out content for people and just be called a paedophile and people telling you shit at games and things. I was streaming PS4 this morning. It's going great. Fucking hardcore Black Ops 2, baby. Yeah. Ran that shit. Fucking hate it. Poke that right up your poop shoot. How zombies with that's bad enough. Fucking zombies with exosuits. I mean, what the fuck? That is ridiculous. You were at school, Jack. How dare you put your education and your entire future above my life? Wow. do. I'll have to do a PS4 live stream one evening. I will do one. What do you mean or not? What the fuck is that in the background that has just given me stage 4 penis cancer? Katie, you fucking knob end. There we go. Takes care of that. That's fucking horrible. My ears are fucking traumatised. I don't believe he left his mic live while he fucked off to have dinner. In fact, yes I do, what am I saying? There's a mute button on your mic. Okay. Pull the bloody plug out of the bottom of it like that, don't I? Don't give me problems, give me solutions. How about do I care? Let's done. Good evening and welcome to the stream. Good evening, Rihanna DeWitt 2001. Hello, welcome. Sorry, I was setting up and then my wife just came back from the supermarket, so I was just helping her unload the car. So it's a little bit delayed. I feel exhausted now. Right, so. What am I doing? Working on this wing. Yeah, so I've got a little bit of the edge work just to do, and then we've got these to dish, and I need to clamp this down. I also need a light on, so I'll do that. So, how are you doing, Rihanna DeWitt? It's been an odd sort of a day today. It's gradually warming up this evening, here anyway. It's been nice in the office. Well, I've been at home today, but in the office the temperature's been 22 degrees, which for me is lovely. It's now, the wind's now dropped and it's now up to 25 degrees here in the studio, and I'm kind of wishing it was a bit cooler. But unfortunately, I can't do much about it. I do have a little bit of a coffee though. Fortunately my wife spilt it. So we get free coffee from the local supermarket. And she spilt it getting it out of the car. So I've got half a cup of free coffee. Which isn't too bad. I must remember not to let it go cold. Fresh coffee. I am smoothing that out, so I want a nice big round U gouge like that one. That's big relatively speaking, I suppose. Yeah, okay, so unfortunately I'm doing this side of the wing, which means you. Well, I suppose I could move the camera. Won't be doing it for long. If you get bored watching, not being able to see what I'm doing, just let me know. I'll move the camera, but I'm hopefully not going to be doing this for too long, and then you'll be back better where you are. Yeah. I am hoping that I feel a little. I get into carving tonight because I'm feeling a little bit sort of tired for some absolutely unknown reason. Not exactly tired, sort of weary. It's a sort of feeling that if I wasn't actually broadcasting, I wouldn't be doing this. But because I am broadcasting, I am, and highly suspect I'm going to be enjoying doing this again in a little while. Not that I'm not enjoying it, but because I do. If I wasn't enjoying it, I just wouldn't do it. But how can I put it? I have slightly less enthusiasm than I normally do. It'll come. Just a slightly off day, I guess, is the best way of describing it. Okay, so that's what I've done there, is just do some work just around the edge of the membrane here, so it creates a nice curve which looks a lot better. And we'll do the same thing here, and then I've got something to do around here just so we get a nice, there's no sort of, as they are here, little sort of bumpy bits. What to do now, actually swap my glasses as well. I don't know if any of the guys on stream actually wear glasses. It's weird, I can see perfectly clear with these glasses. I can see perfectly in focus. But when I swap them for these others, which is slightly stronger prescription, I can see even better and even more in focus. And I didn't actually realise I was out of focus in the first place. Which is sort of a really odd sensation sometimes. And I've had a delivery today of some more rings. This time I ordered the correct ones, so this weekend maybe I shall be making some more jewellery. Certainly I was going to say in the afternoon if I actually stream. I've got some work to do on the house, so I may or may not be streaming in Saturday or possibly even Sunday afternoon this week, but we shall have to see. Now this is going to be awkward because I've textured the background here. I should have remembered to do this wing membrane before I got that far. It won't be so bad because if I do sort of put a cut across the texturing, I can just pre-texture. So I just want to smooth out the curve, or smooth the curve rather. At the moment it's sort of like lots of straight lines. I actually want a curve. It's about as close as I can get because I'll start to hit the knee there if I try and take that any closer. But what I should be able to do now is use one of my smaller gouges. Still a fairly U-shaped gouge, but it's not, with it not having as taller sides, I can get in around this knee a lot better. There we go. Yep. I'm going to try and avoid slamming that down if I can. I don't want to create too many marks in the base. Because I'll just be a little bit harder to get out afterwards. So soon be the weekend, only another day to go. Have you really got anything special going on this weekend? Or is it just a lazy, oh, I suppose it is summer now, isn't it? Summer weekend. Okay, now this bone around here has not been carved really very well. I'm going to see if I can do something about that. Let's pull you just a little bit closer, give you a bit more of a view of what I'm doing. It's a bit more vertical, I'm afraid, but I'm just going to do some work here on this the end of this bone. Ultimately decide whether I want to want it there at all, because at the moment it does not look very good. It's got a very, very rough surface on it, and unless I can make it smooth, I'd rather it wasn't there at all. Because it just looks like sort of it's been knocked about and bits have been chipped out and looks really nasty. Yuck. Not even sure which is the right angle to carve it at. Actually, I'm wondering if I ought to use a knife on this, or at least we use my skew chisel. I'll have a look at it with the skew chisel. Because I can use a skew chisel like a knife. Well, that actually reminds me of seeing that. Last night as I was putting the chisels away, I just caught the edge of, in fact it was this big one, just caught the real corner of this chisel and just slightly dug it in myself. So I've never actually cut myself with the chisels. I've always, when I've actually injured myself on them, it's always been as I've been putting the things away, and I've caught them in the case. This looks horrible actually. Just the transition there. Really not sure what I want to do about it. I almost want to cut it off, but I don't really want to. And that's part of the problem. It's not. It's too thin at that point. Just there. It's gone. It's gone. It's the way it was cut out. It's just a bit too thin. I'll clear that area out there with the flat chisel. I think I can get in there without damaging it. Okay, then we'll see if we can curve that off a little bit and actually make it a bit more presentable. Right, let's see if I can now at least carve something around here. That's not going to do what I want it to do, so I better not scrape like that. That'll just rough up the wood. What I'm trying to do is get, there's a rough patch just around here that looks really untidy. Now what I'm trying to do is shape this wing bone at this point here, and in doing so smooth off that rough patch. Because I really don't, as it stands at the moment, I really don't like the shape, the roughness of it, and it kind of makes me inclined to actually just remove it altogether. What I'm just going to do is just slim down the end of this bone a little bit. It's a really thick bone anyway. It is something that I actually want to do, is slim these bones down a little bit. I wasn't planning to do it just at this instant, but if I can do that, it might actually just make that bone a little bit more presentable. Now this end here is really thin and really weak. Okay, I've removed the rough area. This wing membrane will need to be lowered to adjust, because I've had to change the angle of this. Let's see if I can round this bone off really carefully. I'm going to try using my knife on that, because I need something really sharp. And in actual fact, if I could possibly even get a scalpel out. Now this knife is somewhat sharper than the chisels are, which might be surprising. Till I'm concentrating, I'm sticking my tongue out. I don't know if that's something that everybody does, or if it's unique to a certain group of people. I know other people do it, but I don't know if everybody does that sort of thing when they're really concentrating or trying to be really precise with something. whether they stick their tongues out. I know for some reason a lot of engineers do it in all sorts of walks of engineering, and they're trying to be very precise at something, like trying to adjust something, or so much so it becomes it's become almost an industry joke, you know. To adjust it properly, you've got to get the right tongue angle. If you can't get the right tongue angle, then it just won't adjust properly, whatever the thing is that you're adjusting. Okay, and the knife is giving me a smooth surface, which I'm glad about. Okay, I may have to just do some work in there, but we'll see about that in a while. Let me now take some coffee. Right, let's make some headway on getting the wing membranes adjusted a little bit. So let me put you back over there so you can basically see a little bit better. And it's going to have to be this small gouge, I think I'm going to have to use for this, and even this is probably a bit too big, but we can do it for this area and just a little bit. Well, let's do it here first. We can get so far up the wing membrane with this. Okay, this isn't going too bad. It helps that the grain at this point is happy with me carving in this direction. Actually, I might be lucky on the whole of this wing. It's a little bit awkward on the other wing, but I think maybe this one we're going to turn out to be lucky. Carving really nicely. That makes a change. We seem to have had awkward bits for the past few days, but this bit is doing quite nicely. I'm getting a really nice smooth edge on the bottom here. There we go. That looks quite nice. 3D bloke, good evening. Welcome. You're working in the background, so you're just going to be lurking again. I see. That's quite alright. I'm working on this this wing. Just be dishing out these sections here before I then work on the hand. Got to remember to do the tail. It's quite likely I might forget that, and I'll be going, oh, it's finished, and then go, oh no, it's not. I've done that before now on things. It becomes highly annoying just when you're all excited because you think you're finished and you suddenly see a major part that's not been done. So the sense of disappointment is really strong at that point. Must admit that I am starting to look forward to doing something different. If this wasn't quite as close to finishing, I think what I'd probably end up doing is putting this to one side for a while and doing something else for a little bit. I certainly need to learn how to carve faster, I think. I'm not bored with it. It's more of a case of it would just be nice to do something different for a while. Grain direction is changed around that. Neither side really is the best way to carve that. Some of it is just the wood texture, I think, has changed a little bit in this area. I think we saw that before. The wood's a little bit sort of porous at this point here. It's the best way of describing it, I think. A little bit spongy. We'll try giving this chisel a little bit of a sharpen as well to help get cut through this this area. like that. Yeah, that's better. It won't completely compensate for the spongy area, but the sharper the blade, the less it sort of pushes on the. I'll describe it as the pore of the wood, but instead of sort of pushing the spongy bit apart, separating it a little bit, it doesn't separate it quite so much. Okay, that's not bad. I've got to get right up into the corners there though with this little tiny gouge. Yeah, then this one, yeah, it's going to be more or less pulled from there, but there'll be a little bit here. Okay. And then that's going to pull from the elbow, so that's about the centre there. Well, it's going to go downwards. Okay, there we go. So I've got to start on that now, work it towards the edge. Blend it, sort of blend it in towards the edge of where the body meets this wing membrane. And that's really just removing the sharp edges basically, although the edges aren't sharp, but moving the angle. If I can just make it so that the angle isn't visible, even if it's still there. Because at the moment I can see it quite clearly like a line going down. So it's just like rounding off. If you took a hexagon and you start rounding off the corners, eventually you get to something that approximates a circle. And I'm kind of doing the same thing, just knocking the corners off here so that it approximates a circle. So you don't actually see it. Now I don't want the dishing to go sort of too far up against the arm, because it's gonna join at the same point on the arm. So the dishing is at this end, but this has got to be all one level. So it's sort of a very funny compound shape, really. I'm trying to get into this, where there's a fairly strong dish here, but none at the edges. which is further complicated at this point here because this wing bone is pulling from the elbow, but is also pulling on this membrane as well, so some weird sort of shapes. But that's the fun of it. That's got to be done that way. Yeah, that's what happens. I don't know if you can see that. Let me just zoom in and see if I can show you what happens when you don't actually cut the wood and the wood actually tears. Can you see that on there? Zoom right now. Let me get this camera a bit short. I'm going to try and show you what happens. Let's get that as close as I can. And I'll put the camera back. Okay. Well, first of all, I'll try and focus that. Will it autofocus for me? Come on, try camera. I don't know what it is, camera, about that you think is in focus, but you're completely wrong. There. Now then, this piece of wood that's here, I was carving this way, like that. I got as far as there, and this piece of wood just popped off of its own. So I'd only just got this far, and this bit of wood here popped off. It's still attached right at the end. Now you should just be able to see here is like a dark line. And what it is this bit of wood actually has torn away. I've literally pushed it off in the carving. It just shows you how weak this wood is, and it'll split across a plane. So what I've now got is I've got something like a 3/4 of a millimetre depth edge here, which I've now got to carve around it to reduce that depth, to get rid of that sudden step. So that's the danger you've got of carving off, but it's a danger you've got anywhere really where the grain can work against you, as it has done to me there. And I'm going to have to, yeah, it's sort of wanting to do it again there. I'm sort of stuck in a position where I need to carve this way, but in doing that I'm ripping off wood. Carving this way is actually raising the grain of the wood, which is not what I want to happen. But carving on this way is really awkward. Can be really hard to position the chisel on the edge of a piece of wood, unless you're going to get, trying to get rid of a lot of material. It doesn't really matter just quite how much you try and take off. You only want to just take a very fine sliver starting at the edge. It's really hard to position the chisel to do that. I'm guessing as skill improves it will become easier, but it always helped a little bit there because I've got the knee to rest the chisel on, so I'm not actually having to hold it in three-dimensional space myself, which has made just doing this a little bit well, quite a lot easier, to be frank. But although how being frank helps, I don't know, because that's not my name. So I managed to do that. Now I've got to just adjust all the shapes around it. In order to get in order to make it that extra carving that I've just done there now look okay. And that means sort of widening the dish out this way. It'll mean somehow getting in this area as well, without causing the same problem to occur again. So I know you're busy doing something else, Free, but how's the enthusiasm for painting doing? Are you getting back your inspiration, or are you still feeling sort of out of it at the moment? What I have to do is shave this in little tiny slivers, I think, because I just can't easily get it from the other direction. What I don't want to happen here is a repeat of knocking that bit of wood off. I don't know if you can hear in the background, but the local church is looks like the bell ringers are practicing their art this evening. Still no motivation. I know it's not a very nice feeling, isn't that? Yeah, that's what streaming helped me with, was the fact that kind of having to do it, and it sort of helped with the motivation that way. Once you are streaming, it doesn't it doesn't help, or once you have been streaming, it doesn't help. At least I don't think so, but maybe you'll have to see if you can find another image that you really it makes you really want to have a go at it, Free, and then it may well come back to you. transition there is not very good, so I'm going to do some work on that. There's just an angle here that's not right. Let's just clean up that edge. And there then, I just need to more or less round this off, but no, I'm not comfortable with that angle. When you run your fingers over it, you can sort of feel whether it's right, and it doesn't. It sort of feels lumpy and not quite as I'd expect it to be. And so I'm sort of trusting the feel of it more than visual anyway. I mean, I can hardly see any sort of particular angles or shapes involved in this. But just this bit here, that bit's not so bad. Unusual view this, isn't it, with an extreme close-up like that. Got a little dimple, I think, around there, just in that area there. That's bugging me. And that's sort of better. Yep, that's sort of better. Okay. In doing this, I need to keep the chisel so it's level with the wing membrane, but at right angles, so that I can actually cut just that sort of little step that was there away. But without actually digging into the wood of the wing membrane, as I just did over there. Yeah, then there's got a bit of still a bit of wood here. You can actually just see it. I don't know if you look here, you can see sort of what looks like a slightly discoloured area. It's not actually discoloured, it's just the open pore of the wood, or the open grain of the wood. It's a very slightly spongy effect, whereas here you can see like a shine on it because the grain is closed. It's not been rubbed up the wrong way, really. So I'm trying to do really here is slice the wood, not shave it, because the shaving is what's pushing the grain up, or opening the grain. So if I can slice it, it won't do that, and I'll get sort of a clean area, which is what I've managed to do. Little details, really. You can still see a little bit. There's like a little tiny area. There we go. That'll do, mate. Page RCL2. Good evening. Welcome to the studio this evening. How long does a piece like this usually take you? Very difficult to answer, because this is the first time I've done a piece like this. Excuse me, having my coffee before it goes cold. Or rather, having my coffee before it goes even colder. So it's a bit of a difficult thing to say. Some of the simpler stuff I've done, like, let me zoom this camera out now, and then I'll put the. I've got a piece here. This took about 15 hours, and that's mainly because this particular piece of wood, which is ash, is really hard to cut, and therefore it was really shallow. I did a really shallow relief cut on it. So something of that complexity, which isn't really complex, sort of 10 hours if I was doing it in this wood. This we've been doing about in the order of 30 to 40 hours of carving so far. We're not we're closer to being finished than we are to starting, but excuse me, there's still a heck of a lot of work to do on it. Is that the V? I can never remember which of these two chisels is the V shape and the U shape. That's U. Okay. Well, thank you for keeping me followed. That's kind of you. Yeah, it's so far on the stream, since I started streaming, everything I have done is the first of its kind that I've done. I've never done something. I've carved before. I've never carved a dragon. I've carved before. I've never carved in ash. Knowing, and I've got no yardstick to measure how long something would take. The pyrography, again, they've been kind of new pieces, so it's been challenging to answer it, or it is kind of challenging to answer that question. And yes, I did realise you meant this particular piece, paged RCL. But next time, if I was to do something of this size and of about this complexity, then I'd have a reasonable idea. That I'm talking sort of 3 or 4 weeks on stream, shall we say, which is what amounts to sort of 30 to 40 hours. but I would I'd also be able to bear in mind certain things that have slowed this down. Like, for example, this tail would have been better if I'd put it on the other side. Then I wouldn't have, because I got quite restricted access around here when I started. Make that just a bit closer. Let's see if I can. The camera's shadowing the light a little bit, and that's probably out of focus now that I've moved the camera. There we go. And things like down here, the back of the head, I should perhaps have moved this wing over a little bit, or at least the arm bone over a little bit, so that I had more clearance down the back of here to get in. And a little bit here, for example, as well, just in this area behind the foot was quite an awkward one. So there's that it's been a learning experience in that respect as well. So hopefully the next time I do something like this, it's not I don't make it quite as hard for myself. The irons, good evening. How often do I work the wood? That's another awkward question to answer, a difficult question to answer. I've probably, since I started carving, which is now probably about 3 or 4 years ago, I've probably done about 10 pieces in total. But as Free's having a problem with there as well, sometimes it's quite hard to get the I found it was quite hard to get the motivation to actually do anything. So those 10 pieces, which were relatively quick pieces, sort of 5-6 hours, were done many months apart. But the two that I've done on stream, which was that rose you saw a minute ago and this one, were probably done only about 5 or 6 weeks apart. So because doing things on stream was sort of, if you like, motivated me to do them, actually show you guys me doing things. And so how often do I work wood? That's sort of the order so far. I probably expect to do the next carving piece once this is finished in about maybe say 6 weeks after this one's finished, because I do other crafts as well. So the pyrography I already mentioned. There's scraper board, there's chainmail jewellery, there's punchcraft. So there's some other things to do, and then this will come back into the rotation. I'll do another piece, and it really depends on how long they take before I know when I'm going to be back into doing carving. And I may not do a piece as complex as this, or I may try something in full 3D next time, although that might be a little bit awkward to do because I don't have a proper carving vise to hold it. But I am getting a little bit sort of restless with doing this, so I may decide next time not to do one quite so that's going to take quite so long to do. Your grandpa used to do this kind of thing, Paige Darcy L. Okay. Well, I trust I am living up to his standards of work. Practice, yeah, you're right. It is all about practice, and speed as well comes from practice. So I'm not a particularly fast carver. Generally speaking, I've never really seen the need to be particularly fast, but when you're doing something like this, which has gone on a fair bit of time now, I think perhaps if I could do with having a little bit more speed, shall we say. Some of it's confidence to take a big chunk of material out, which I didn't at the start of this because I wasn't really sure what how I was going to carve things. Never having done a dragon before, never had, you know, all this sort of stuff. Everything's new. Perhaps if I was to do another animal, then you know I'd be a bit more confident next time, which would potentially help, and therefore I'd be able to do things a bit faster. Okay. Now just sort of creating a small dish in these areas here. I mean, they're fairly close together. They're not going to be really deep anyway. Isn't sort of that sort of stretch on the material. So I'm just making it sort of enough to be noticeable, but not enough to look out of place. Well, the other thing I suppose I ought to do at some point as well is just generally do some practicing which isn't really related to actually carving a particular object, which is really just learning more about how to use the tools. The problem is I kind of feel like I'm wasting wood if I do that, so I generally like to practice doing something, even if I ultimately ruin it because I'm practicing. But for some reason it feels better to me to waste wood by ruining something whilst I'm practicing than it is to just practice on a piece of wood and waste it and have nothing at the end of it. It's a bit of a weird thing in my psyche, I guess, is that. But I mean, I'm using a little tiny U-gouge here, and if you've heard me on the streams for a little while, you'll know that I keep mentioning it's quite difficult to create a smooth surface with a tiny U-shaped gouge. You're always trying to take the ridge between two cuts off, which is really hard to hold such a small chisel in the right place to do that. And so ultimately you end up with the bottom of this area here like a load of ruts, basically. And so, you know, in theory I should be able to smooth it off using this. In practice I don't have the skill, and that's where I should perhaps just take a small block of wood perhaps and just shave away using this tool. And just keep practicing on that piece of wood to try and create a flat surface cut into the wood using the gouge, so that when I do want to cut a piece like this, you know, I've developed that skill, assuming it's possible, to be able to do that. But there again, since about the only time I have to do available to do things like carving is when I am streaming, I'm not quite sure how much you guys would like to see me just cutting into a block of wood, not actually making anything, just literally cutting into a block of wood, creating sort of troughs in it. Strikes me, I was about to say it strikes me as possibly quite a bit boring for you to watch, but there again, I'm not actually certain that this is that exciting to watch. I may be wrong, of course, but and if you've not watched for a while, you may not be aware. I'm trying my best not to need to sand any of this. Sanding changes the surface texture. So there's some areas of this which, because of the way the wood's carved, is really shiny, and I'd like to get the background the same. Really smooth, really shiny. And if I sand it, it'll go matte rather than shiny. And the whole thing will look the same matte colour. Not especially a problem, I suppose, and if I was going to paint it, for example, it wouldn't make any difference. Interestingly though, the other thing of course you do when you do that is you lose what they call the tooling marks, the chisel marks. For a lot of people actually, a hand-worked piece like this, they want to see the tooling marks, which in itself is a little bit of a contradiction, because if I was some carpenters, some carvers are, they are so good that they basically don't leave tooling marks. And yet that's what people want to see. So you sometimes get some really excellent carvers that have to sort of downgrade their work in order to satisfy the person that's buying it, which is quite funny in a way. So you don't want me, it's kind of like, you don't want my best work, you want me purposely to make a slight mess of it just so that you can believe I've done it. And actually sometimes I am aware for some carvers that that is potentially a problem, in that when they've done some really superb carving, and yet people don't believe they've actually done it because it is such good work. And that's kind of a pity that people can't believe that somebody can do work to whatever level it is that they're seeing, and without thinking it has to have been done either by a machine or some sort of magical process that suddenly smoothed out all the wood or something like that. I didn't have exactly the same problem, but I did have that sort of experience with once with somebody who didn't, with one of the pyrographic pieces I'd done, who didn't actually believe that I'd done it by hand. They thought I'd done it using sort of a laser or something like that. Not quite sure how they thought I'd done it, maybe handheld a laser or something, but because if it's been done with a laser on a Cartesian robot, like the laser cutters or things like that, you can see the lines it's made, unless they're doing really, really, really tiny, but you tend to see lines. It's what they call the raster. And handheld pyrography just doesn't look the same. In fact, lasers often, there's often a difference with a laser, and that is you're looking at black and white almost all the time, and just different. It might sound daft, but different thicknesses of black, or because the laser, of course, burns, even if it's on for a really short time, actually burns the wood quite strongly. It just doesn't do it as deeply is perhaps the word. So if it's a thin layer of burn, it's grey. If it's a thicker layer, it goes blacker. Whereas pyrography, using the sorts of tools that I use, the wood goes brown, not exactly a shade of black. The two sort of work in a slightly different way. Each have their own place, of course. They actually do have a little tiny laser robot here to build one of these days, which I got specifically for the purpose of just experimenting with it. Not as a laser cutter, it will cut. It won't cut wood, but it will sort of cut foam or paper, that sort of thing. But I did get it specifically to experiment with it actually generating images. One of these days I'll actually have to build it. Do that on stream as well. Lusho7. Sorry, I was busy chatting or pontificating or whatever you want to call it, and not looking up at the chat window. Thank you very much. I think it looks quite good as well. I'm quite pleased, given that I had no idea how to do it when I started. And Lost in House, good evening. Welcome to the studio. You're going to lurk as well. That's okay, I don't mind. I caught a little bit of your stream earlier on today. Then I needed to concentrate on something, so I had to stop it. But I was watching you there with you had a visit. Oh, I will say you had a visitor. I could see somebody sat in the background. And I was trying to work out if you... I saw Bernard and then he disappeared off. But then I was trying to work out if there was another black dog on the seat behind where you were stood. Not quite sure. 3D Block's around. He's lurking as well. So the two of you can lurk in common. I'm going to do some more work on these wing bones shortly, and then we'll probably do a little bit more just around here. And I'm going to just tidy up in this area as well. Okay, that's not bad. Just doing a little bit of carving down the side here. Not something that often gets done, but in this particular case it's appropriate to do so. Sorry, my voice went a bit odd then. A little bit of an odd carving technique this, but what I'm doing is really just taking off really fine slivers, so by moving it fairly fast I'm not actually, well, it kind of just makes the job easier. I'm not quite sure how I'd describe what's actually going on there. Okay, hand, a little bit of hand around here, tail. Then it's undercut all the wings and around here. And then we're getting a lot closer to finishing. That wing membrane I'm going to leave exactly as it is. We will need to do some tidying up. There's a little, you know, you've got little rough bits of wood. You won't see them on stream unless I zoom in, but little just rough bits that I will need to sort of do some work on. And I do need to get rid of those pencil marks now. Right, so let's carve this hand, I think, and thumb. Carving here really is just a case of rounding it over more than anything else. You know, we don't have too many sharp edges in like this in animals. What I really have to be careful of is if I push too hard, this will actually crack off. Don't want it to crack off, I want it to stay there. So I've just done is switch to the skew chisel, because with the skew chisel I can slice the wood. I can use the skew chisel like a knife. In actual fact, maybe what I should do instead of use the skew chisel like a knife is actually use a knife. As I mentioned earlier, this knife is actually sharper than the chisels are. That's the back of the hand. Don't Trying to work out what sort of shape I want on the back of the hand there. It needs to have some sort of shape, it can't be flat. Actually, maybe that's the trick. Okay. Now I just have to be a little bit careful of is sort of the transitioning into this bone here. I kind of don't want to carve the bone away, which if I'm not careful it'll go too flat just in this area. And sometimes that, like the pencil mark on there now, I can tell when I've carved away because of course the pencil marks disappeared. So sometimes, like, you know, when I have been carving other pieces, I'll deliberately put, you know, like a layer, scribble pencil on things, and especially if I'm trying to round something off, because you can see where you've cut and where you haven't. And I am sort of trying to keep this rounded shape, so it has helped in that respect just around there. Which was one of those useful or well, sort of little tips that make doing some jobs easier. Forget that, use the chisel for that. I can get a better angle with the chisel. Let's give that a little bit of a tweak in terms of sharpness. I'm carving on from the edge, which is, as I mentioned earlier, it's not something I like to do because it's really hard to position the chiseling sort of 3 dimensions to get just a really fine cut, which is what I'm trying to do just in this area. Take really fine slivers. If I try and carve the other way, I'm likely to knock the ends off, so I have to carve coming in from the edge, but so, well, I was going to say I was just thinking that a little tiny surf form would help enormously doing this, but then the thought just occurred to me, something like a paper nail file, a cardboard nail file actually would probably help as well, and I'm just wondering whether I've got one of those around. Normally I don't like using, as I say, sandpaper, which is what a nail file is, but in this particular case it might actually be, this is such a small area that I'm not too worried about the wood surface in terms of whether it's shiny or not, just around the thumb here, and indeed if it's not, it might just look more like a claw than a finger as such, so again it wouldn't be that detrimental. But it would allow me to shape very finely, as long as I can be careful not to knock the end off. can't often use chisels like this naked without the handle. Just sometimes it's like it here, this particular moment, it's just easier to hold it this way than with a big handle on the end. I've got a cutting mark down this left hand side here which I am trying to just pare away at. I'd like it to go away, and you get tooling marks to go away by basically carving or lowering the surface of the wood around them so that you get to the bottom of the mark. A bit like getting rid of a hole by not by filling it in, but by digging the dirt around it away, so that you can't see the hole was ever there. Okay, I shall leave that for the moment because it really requires me now to undercut here before I go any further in doing that. So now we go to the tail. Start by rounding off around here. And I'm going to have fun because the wood grain's that way, so I'm going to go from two different angles. And you have to go from two different angles like that. Getting them to join up on both sides can be a little awkward. It's actually a little bit easier on outside curves like this than it is on inside curves. So a convex curve rather than a concave curve. So these were concave curves. The tops of the bones and the tail here is a convex curve. And when you're using a flat chisel like this, a convex curve is often easier to do because you can just angle the blade to the flat so it just hits the high spots. Mind you, although I said convex curves are easier than concave ones, that's a relative statement. I'm trying to make this tail appear to be round, but I'm starting to succeed, but it's really easy to just put a big flat on it that you didn't intend. Not really sure what I'm going to do with the tip of the tail just yet. I think this tail here is probably still a bit too too thick, so we'll lose a bit of height. That will make it a little bit more believable when it's hugging the rock. It would do if it's too thick. Whilst I can undercut the edges slightly, I really don't want to on this. So undercutting it would allow me to sort of round the bottom off a bit as well, and so it looks like a round tail, but equally that will weaken its joint with the wood. And if I just slim the tail, the tail height down a little bit, your eye will naturally assume that it's hugging the rock, and therefore you can't see the bottom edge of the tail, and you accept it, just the top edge being rounded. It's a funny thing the way your eyes and brain work to see things, especially see things that aren't there. A bit like that famous vase of the two faces, where something that is there makes you see something that isn't. I think I might make that sort of a... Don't really want to make it quite a rat tail, but I think I probably want to make it a bit of a flat paddle end on the tail. So we'll start by actually making this a round edge. Sorry, my hands are going to be in the way here. Just rounding the curve off, because as I said earlier, when I cut this, I just roughly cut it. I didn't do any final shaping on it, so it was all done with just this straight chisel. So all the edges are or were sort of made up of just lots of straight cuts. So around these wings I had to smooth off, and around here with using a round edge tool. Okay, we'll look at that, and then I think what I'm going to do is just put a curve into this like that. So we'll nibble that away without doing too much damage to the mounting underneath. Hopefully. So if I do it in little tiny nibbles, I've got better control than trying to do a great big thick cut in one go. Now I've got to get rid of that waste wood at the bottom of there. That chisel won't get in at that point. Let's try this little tiny one. Right, this will get in there, but it'll be doing it in little tiny bites. Right, now let's clean this wood out so I can see what's left. Okay. Here we go, and that's that bit done. Now we go back to just shaping off the tail here. Round this off now. I don't know why. Well, it must be static electricity. I'm just thinking, I don't know why the shavings always stick to the end of the chisel. It must be some form of static electricity, I guess. Maybe I'm splitting atoms by doing this. So I leave a charge on the tool. So if there's a dirty great big bang, you know, I've been a little bit too good at splitting an atom. I suppose at that point what I should have arranged to do is drop something like a great big tray behind me and see which of you jumped. And of course I can always do the same thing just by suddenly shouting bang. But of course if you're wearing a headset that would be a little bit uncomfortable. For those of you that are listening, do you listen to streams with your headset on, or do you actually sort of just use room speakers? I know I find wearing a headset starts to get uncomfortable after a while, and I either wear earbuds, or if I can I avoid it altogether and just use the speakers. You know, I've gone and done it again, haven't I? I've created myself an angle there. That's going to be quite an awkward one to carve. Earlier on in the stream I was talking about what I'd do differently next time, like put in and etc. And I go and do it again. Dear, it just shows you as aesthetics, if you like, override common sense. Which obviously isn't so common around these ear parts. Of course, sometimes I even wonder if you lot are actually listening to me with the sound turned off, so that you can watch other streams or get on with something else. I don't mind if you do, by the way. It's not mandatory that you have to listen to me prattling on. There are often lots more streams that are much more interesting to listen to. Okay, we're getting this curve working now on the tail. I think we're going to have to do the inside curve perhaps with the knife, because I'm not sure what I'd ideally need is what they call a spoon-shaped chisel, and a basic. I've got one here, one that's obvious. Well, this is obvious, I guess. If you like, you can see the sharp chisel, so the flat chisel, and this one is canted or bent up, so that if you hold that flat, this is lifted, and that's what they call a spoon shape, because it's like a spoon shape. But what that allows you to do is turn internal corners, which you can't do with a flat chisel. And I've got to turn an internal corner here, so I may actually end up just using the knife to do the inside edge, because I don't have a chisel. That it might just go by using the cutting flat, a bit like a spoon. So I might just try it, because I do actually find it easier to use a flat chisel to create round areas like this than I do using the knife. So let's see, let's try it. That's where the wood grain changes direction, just there. And I can't easily come up out of the grain. I might not have a lot of choice. Sorry about that. Me suddenly doing that was, as you might have gathered, I just dropped the knife, and it's sharp. The instinct is to get away from the sharp bit as quickly as possible. Don't ever try and attempt to catch a knife that you drop, or a chisel for that matter. Get out of its way. I know for a lot of people the instinct is to try and catch, but that's when you would seriously hurt yourself. Especially if I tried to catch this and it got stuck on something and I'd end up stabbing myself, and that of course wouldn't be very pleasant. Right, I'm using the knife here because although the knife itself does have a similar problem trying to come up out of the grain, it's a little bit narrow as you can see, but I can slice with this, which means I can cut through the grain, which I can't easily do with a flat chisel. So although a knife's not required to carve with, sometimes I am discovering that sometimes it does make certain things easier. I say discovering because this is on this piece. This is the first time I've used a knife in conjunction with the chisels. Oh, that reminds me. Just needed to make a note for myself for after the stream. For some reason, something just occurred to me that I'd completely forgotten about, and I have no idea why it occurred to me, but it did. Brains are weird things. A Fluffing Beach, $79.98. What are you doing? I apologise for laughing, but it's kind of you're watching a video picture. I'm not having a go at you, by the way. It just strikes me as being funny. You're watching a video picture of me doing something. There's text on the screen that's telling you what I'm doing, and you're asking the question. But I don't mind. This is called relief carving. I'm carving an image of a dragon out of a solid piece of wood, and we're doing it in such a way that it's not a full three-dimensional image. It's going to have a backplate, as you can see here. And that's called relief carving. I sometimes describe it as 2.5D carving. So that's currently what I'm doing. I'm carving the tail here. I'm rounding it off. We had the rough carve left it as a square shape. I'm now doing, as we're doing the final carvings, is rounding it off, smoothing the sides down, so it looks like a as you might expect a tail to look. It looks rounded and not like a square. Well, square anything really. I'm doing it currently with a knife rather than a chisel, just because certain things are a little bit easier with a knife. I normally prefer using a flat chisel to do curves like this, but some of the grain directions make it a little bit awkward, and with a knife I can do slicing actions rather than shaving actions, which is what a chisel does. It does a shaving action rather than a slicing action, and therefore I can, by doing a slice, I can cut the wood in a slightly different way. Some of the constraints that I'd have with a chisel go away when you're using a knife, like when you're slicing using a knife. Of course, I can actually use a knife to shave with as well, so there are times when it's a useful tool. I've got a bit of a high spot on the tail, but of course I've got the tail, but the backbone, which of course leads straight into the tailbone. Now there's two ways of doing it with the tailbone. It's either the tailbone is in the middle of the tail, or it sits on the top of the tail. Now I've kind of got as it happens, it kind of transitions just around there, which is I think I might make it a little bit less prominent, but otherwise it's an acceptable sort of thing to happen. Well, I consider it acceptable for this particular piece, to be able to feel that tailbone come around. Okay, now I'm going to go down and around the flat of the tail there. Yeah. This is another one to use the knife for, because I've got a change of the wood grain angle, just because of the way that the tail curves around. And if I'm not careful using the chisel, what I'll end up doing is splitting the wood, which, as you'll have gathered by now, is not something I want to happen. So Everybody's quiet in the chat tonight. Everybody's lurking. So you got something to do with the weather? On a completely different subject, I mentioned last night, for anybody who was interested in Farming Simulator, that Cytec have actually announced their Farming Simulator wheel and pedals and console. Well, actually, I think they've launched pre-orders now in the States. So they've actually got it up on their website, and I was looking at it today. And I thought, you know what, actually, it looks really interesting because, well, I was interested before, but what they've done is it's a 3-part unit, and there's a steering wheel with the buttons on the steering wheel, and there's pedals, couple of foot pedals. But what they've done is they've got a third panel, which is separately connected to the PC. It's got its own USB connection, and they're actually selling it separately, which is a really clever thing. It's clever in one way because people who already have a steering wheel obviously don't necessarily want to replace it, especially if it's something like a G27, which is, you know, a pricey thing in a way. And there's, you know, I certainly wouldn't want to replace that with an unknown quantity and don't particularly want to buy another wheel just to see if it's any better, because I like my G27. I also like the fact it's got 3 pedals, but that's a different question. But the thing about this looks like, and if Cytec do their normal sort of driver thing, what they've said is there's something like about 27 buttons and switches on this panel, and also there's a joystick which moves in the 4 normal directions, and you can twist it. It's got a couple of switches on the top, which they describe as mode switches. But I can see it being extremely useful for other things, like Free D-Blog the other night, or yesterday, was on about the fact that you know, it could perhaps do with or we'd quite like to have sort of physical control of a Kerbal Space Program, and this looks like it probably would do that job, assuming of course Kerbal would accept the inputs, because the joystick has 6 degrees of freedom, or 6 degrees of movement, which is precisely the sort of thing you'd need for a space capsule in a way. Yeah, sideways, up and down, and twist to do the twisting action. The yaw, isn't it? And because you can, you know, push a button on the top, and they describe it as a mode switch, which doubles the amount of functions on the joystick. So you get sort of push a button, and you get a new, almost like it's a second joystick. You can choose between one or the other with a button on the top. But one of the other things that it appears to be is they have designed it with the thought of potentially having 2 of these on a PC. So they won't, you know, they'll identify themselves separately. They're not a one-off thing, which also looks quite interesting for things where you need 2 of these joysticks. Now they're sort of industrial control joysticks. They're not the sort of joystick that you fly a flight simulator with. I don't particularly think they're more like the joysticks you drive a forklift truck with, but still looks really interesting for that. Now it looks like the launch price in the States is $149, which probably means in the UK it's going to be about the same, £150, but it's a little bit pricey, but it does look interesting. I say, with it's got something like I'll say 19, but 20. There's quite a lot of buttons on it that can be programmed as well. So I can see it being useful. I mean, I, for example, can see it being useful for Euro Truck Simulator, because you could program your lights on there and your wipers and the buttons to switch the computer and I don't know what other things, disengage the trailer, lift the rear axle if you got a liftable axle on your truck. And it sort of would be like it was on the dashboard of the truck in a way. It clamps to the edge of the desk. So it looks as though it could be a really nice controller for simulator games. I mean, even something like the ship simulators as well. Because bow thrusters, for example, could perhaps be used by it, or stuff like that. And of course, with lots of switches to program. Any game that uses programmable buttons on a controller, you've got rather a lot of them there, just in a nice control bank. Unfortunately, though, it doesn't look like they're going to launch it in the UK until later this year, more towards Christmas. Apparently they're going to be having this thing at E3, so we might see some reports on it out of some of the magazines when they take a look at it at E3. But the pictures on the website certainly look really nice at the moment. Now I don't mind the tail end here going a little flat. I think it might actually look interesting. So yeah, let's try and do that. I just decided for myself what shape I want this tail end to be. If I can get in there with the knife. A little bit sort of spade shaped or pointy. That's kind of done what I want there. There's a little bit more tidying up on this side, a bit of finagling. No idea where that word comes from, but it does not seem appropriate at sometimes. Sort of word that sounds like it used to be somebody's name, and they used to do something which people then sort of attribute it to that person, and then it sort of got passed on to other people. Don't I talk a lot of rubbish at times? Right, there we go. Still got a little bit more on that hand to do, I think. It's got a really flat top, but it's 10:15. And I think it's getting a bit dark in here. I could do with a cold drink. And I could do with having a little bit of a rest. I'm watching a train simulator for the evening before I go to bed. So let's just clean this up a little bit, then you can take a look. Zoom out a bit. Captain Derby, hello there. I'm sorry, but you've joined just as I'm about to start and wrap up. We've made quite a bit of progress on this now. I've got the tail. Might take another look at it. I've got a bit of cleaning up to do, but the tail might take another look at it. But I've got it largely shaped now. The wing membranes are largely shaped. I think I probably want to still try and shave down these bones a little bit. This one's not so bad. The others are a little bit thick. And I have a little bit more work to do on this hand. It's got a very flat top. I don't want to lose that flatness a little bit. It's really just a case of bringing these finger bones in a little bit more, and then we will undercut around the wings where we can do so safely without cracking off material, and then the background to get rid of the tooling marks that have been made, and it's close to being finished. Close though is a relative term. That's probably at least another 3 or 4 nights. It might be finished sort of Monday night, I think. We shall see. But there we go. That's the dragon as he stands at the moment. Hopefully some of the background work will get rid. You can see this looks whiter than the background. Get rid of some of that marking as well, and here, for example. And this is what I was talking about earlier with the direction of cut. Cutting it in the wrong direction lifts the grain a little bit, and you get this white area as opposed to the shiny. But anyway, there you go, folks. Hope you have enjoyed watching that. Anybody who's watching that isn't following me, I would of course encourage you to do so. That way, tomorrow night when I go live, you'll get a notification. Or you should do, provided Twitch is doing what it's meant to do. You're also welcome, or encouraged even, to follow me on Twitter. On Twit. I'm the Twit. On Twitter. Details are below the stream window, and also you'll see them on the end plate as well. But just briefly, it's @ZeroGanart, which of course is all over this, all over Twitch. And if you just want to drop in tomorrow night, you're quite welcome to do that. If you don't want to work out what 2000 hours British summertime is, 1900 hours GMT, take a look at your clock. Go on, take a look at your clock, and subtract 2 hours 20 minutes. That would be 8 o'clock in the UK, but then that time tomorrow. I'm pointing with my fingers below the camera so you can't see what I'm doing, but anyway, so that's the time tomorrow, and most nights around that sort of time as well. But apart from that, I want to say good night to all of you. It's late in the UK, so it's good night for me, even if it isn't for you guys. So if it's not night time for you, I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye bye.